Hi guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is the video number 4 in my Maya for Beginners tutorial series. And in this video I'm going to continue with Maya fundamentals. I'll show you how to hide and show your objects and how you can do it in Outliner, what hotkeys you can use. Also show you layer editor, which is just here, and how to use layers to hide and show a different set of objects. And then we'll explain how you can duplicate different objects in Maya, what does duplicate with transform mean, what is duplicate special, and at the end of this video I'll also show you how you can align objects together and how you can use different snap align objects tools in Maya. Okay, so let's continue. First of all, let me mention a few things that are relevant to my previous videos, or perhaps something I already mentioned but I want to spend a little bit more time explaining it. Let's come back for a second to groups and how to select objects within your group. For example, you can see these 4 cubes. If I select them from viewport with the lasso tool, just like this, it might look like I selected the whole group, but I actually selected the objects. When I select the whole group, you see the color changes, so it's slightly brighter blue color. So this way you know that whole group selected. This group has pivot in the middle of our world. So if I want to rotate my objects as a group, they will be rotated around the pivot that the group has. But if I just select the objects from viewport like that and start rotating them, every object will be rotated around their own pivot using their own settings for axis orientation. And of course, to select the whole group, when you select an object, you can just use your arrow up. Also, when we have complex hierarchy of objects, for example, I want to parent this object to that, and then I want to parent that object to this one, and then this one to this one. So now if I open my group, I will see there is another object, then there is another object, then there is another object, then there is another object. To see all the hierarchy in your outliner with one click, you can use Shift. If you hold Shift and click on a plus, it will open all the hierarchies that has every object, so you will see every object in your group. Let's unparent all of them and use Shift P. And let me show you something else about channel box. If I select one attribute like translate X and want to move it, and then I select another attribute to move it again, the other thing I can do with Shift, I can select the multiple attributes and move it across both of X and Y axis, for example. And for example, if I want to scale my cube from Outliner, I can select scale X, scale Y, and scale Z, and use middle mouse button and click and drag to change the units across all the 3 axes from the channel box. In the channel box, you also have visibility here, for example, and it says on. To switch between on and off, you can highlight it and use 1 and 0. 0 would be off, 1 would be on. It's not only about visibility, there is different attributes that using on and off settings, and 1 and 0 could be just slightly quicker way to change between them. And the last thing you need to be aware of when you work with a channel box or attribute editor, it might sometimes look like you reach top number. For example, let's create a new cube and maybe isolate it so we can see it slightly better. Okay, so if I go to attribute editor and I want to add more subdivisions, if I click and drag it, it looks like Maya only allows me to use 50 subdivisions on this cube. And this is never true. When you reach the maximum amount of units you can use within any attribute in attribute editor or in a channel box, you can always change them manually and use more. So now I have 100 subdivisions, and you see Maya also moved slider in the middle, so now it would allow me to have 200 as a maximum number. I can go in even higher than that. I can go and select 500, for example. The same in the channel box. For example, if I select the subdivision, if I select this subdivision's height and use middle mouse button, I have reached my limit, which is 50. Can't get higher than that, but I can always type number manually. And now I have 100. And let me also show you how you can delete nodes. For example, let's have a cylinder, and I'll select this edge and I'll add bevel. Let's add more segments, and then I'll select this edge and we'll add another bevel. Maybe this one would be in a different. So now we have two bevels that I applied to the same object. And for example, I want to go back and delete my first bevel. What I can do, I can go to channel box, I can find my node, which is polybevel 1, and the polybevel 2 would be the second bevel we created. If I select it, I can go edit and I can choose delete node. So now I have just deleted the nodes that I created before I applied this bevel. As I showed you in my previous video, because Maya often will change the order of the faces, and quite often when you go back and delete something, Maya will rearrange and break your shape. But sometimes it still could be useful to be able to do that. And I know I have showed you freeze transformation and reset transformation already. I just want to quickly show you the difference between those two. For example, I have this object and I move it around, and then I go modify, reset transformation. What happens, it will reset my transformation to 0, but it will also move it to the center of the world. And let's undo that. And if I go modify freeze transformation, so again, it will reset all the transformation to 0, but it won't move it back to the center of the world. And now this is like the new default position of my object. So if I move it around and I do it again, I go modify, reset transformation, Maya will move the object back to exactly the same place where I freeze transformation last time, and will also move pivot back to the middle of the world. So if I click D and right mouse button, I can reset pivot back to its center. And the last thing I want to show you about axis orientation, something I believed I missed in my previous videos. Let's go to vertex component mode, and let's just select a few vertices. If I change axis orientation to component, and let's select more, what happens, Maya will create axis orientation based on the average of all the components that I have just selected. So if I move them like that, all of them will move toward this direction, which is like the average of normals of all the vertices I have selected. And let me do the same on this side. Okay, so if I select all of them and switch from component axis orientation to normal, and now if I move them along normals, you see every component would move towards their own normals. So for example, all of them will be moving along their normals toward to that direction, when in a component mode they all will be moving toward just one direction. And there's something else. I literally learned it a few weeks ago, and I think Autodesk added it in the latest Maya versions, because I don't remember it existed before. The same way you move components along normals, now you can do with a hotkey. And you can also do it in the face or edge mode, for example. Let's start with vertices. If I go back to any other axis orientation, like for example object, and I hold Control and middle mouse button, I can move all the components along their normals. If I select some faces, for example, that area, again I'm using any of the axis orientation. I click and hold Control, and with middle mouse button I can move the faces along their normals, just the same way as I showed you with vertices. It could be very handy when you need to change like the thickness of your object. For example, I select all the faces of this cut, then click and hold Control, and I can make my cut thicker or slightly thinner. This could be very handy. And now let's talk about topics of this video. Okay, now let's talk about how we can hide and show objects. As I showed you a little bit earlier, you have this visibility attribute you can switch on and off. The easiest way to do it is to use H on your keyboard, like that. So you can select multiple objects and hide them. And then if you go to Outliner, all the hidden objects, they grayed out, but you can still select them in Outliner. And now if I select all this and click H again, so it just like toggled the visibility of objects on and off. If you want to hide all the objects but not the ones that you selected, you can use hotkey Option H, like that. So it might look like we just isolated our selected objects, but it's slightly different because now we have all these objects that is hidden. If I want to unhide all of them, one of the ways to do it would be to select all the objects in my outliner and click Shift H, and it will unhide all the objects that is hidden. Let's undo that and watch what happens if I just click H when I select all the objects in Outliner. It will inverse my hidden objects, so the objects that was visible now is hidden and all other objects are visible again. The other way to show everything that was hidden in your scene without selecting it in Outliner would be go to Display, Show All. Now every single hidden object would be shown, and you don't need to select it in Outliner. When I hide objects one by one, like I hide this one, then I hide this one, then I hide this one. If I click Command Shift H, it will show me the last hidden object. Also, if you go there and you say Show, you will find Show Last Hidden Object. The same happens if we go into component mode, for example, faces, and select some faces, and then when I click H on keyboard, you see, it will hide these faces. I can select more faces and hide even more. And if we go back to object mode, all the faces still will be hidden. And now, as you can see, I can actually see in Outliner that some of the faces hidden. If I select the object and I want to show all the hidden faces, I would use Option Control H. And the same in any component mode. Option Control H will show me all the faces. Watch what happens if we have multiple objects. For example, we'll go back and hide those faces. Then we'll move to another object, highlight some faces, hide some more faces. And now Option Control H will show all the hidden components. If you go to main menu display, you will also see it here. Display show all components. So when you use Isolate Select, it works slightly different. It doesn't change visibility of all the objects around. The default Maya hotkey for Isolate Select is Control 1, but I have changed it in my previous video, so this is my Isolate Select. So I'm using question mark key for select select, and also of course you can use this little icon here. There is another hotkey for you can also use to select your objects. It's Shift I. The only difference is that if I click Shift I, nothing happens. I need to deselect my object first, and then I click Shift I, and I switch back from isolate select to normal view. So this is how you can hide and show objects and components just using outliner, viewport, and a few hotkeys. And now let's talk about layer editor. Layer editor is extremely useful way to sort out your objects and also be able to hide and show different objects. But there is also more interesting features I want to show you. So for example, let's have more cats in our scene and more mice and maybe more rabbits. Let's go crazy. Okay, so let's say I want to have all the rabbits on one layer, all the mice on another layer, and all the cats on another layer. When I select object and go, if you open channel box layer editor here, you see there is a little icons here. So the top right icon, if you click on it, it will create a new layer. It will place selected object on this layer. So now this bunny should be on layer 1. I can check it by switching visibility on and off here. If you ever used Blender before, I think this is quite similar to Blender collections. If I want to place all these other bunnies on the same level, first I'll select them, then I go to layer 1. If I click right mouse button, I can add selected objects, so let's do that. And now all the bunnies, oh, I missed these two guys. Right mouse button, add selected objects. And now all the bunnies are on layer 1. If I change visibility, now I can very easily select all the mice and click this icon again, so it will create a new layer for me. Be careful here. For example, if I want to use a hotkey for select all, currently I don't see bunnies and I don't see mice because I changed layer visibility. But if I use this hotkey, you see, in outliner you can notice that it will select all the objects that I have listed in my outliner. So let's just use lasso tool, select all the cuts and create a new layer. To rename layer, you just need to double click with a left mouse button and you can get access to this layer settings. So there will be cuts, this will be mice and rabbits. So now we have cats, mice and rabbits. What else can we do with layers? If I click right mouse button, I can see that I can select all the objects that are currently assigned to that layer, so I'll do that. Now all the cards selected. I can also select a few objects that I don't want to be on the same layer, so I can select them, click right mouse button and choose remove selected objects, so I will do that. Now if I check, only those cards are part of the same layer. You can also delete layer and empty the layer, which will remove all the objects that currently assigned to cat's layer. One of the way to see what actual objects you have inside every layer would be go to membership. And now we can see relationship editor that has display layers, and this is the current layers we have, and this is the objects that assign to the layer. For example, if I want to assign all the cat's objects to that cat layer, let's assume that every cat object has the correct name, which I think they do. Let's search for a cat. We can search for cat and it will filter all the objects I have in the scene and only show me the objects that start with a cat. And now I can just highlight all of them with Shift, and when they're highlighted, it means that they already assigned to that layer, so you don't need to do anything else. Let's clear our filter. For example, if I go to rabbits layer and see what happened here, you see all these rabbits highlighted. So if I want to remove one of the rabbit from the layer using relationship editor, I can just click on any layer, and as soon as I deselect it, it will automatically remove it from the layer. Let's check it out. So now we have a layer with cats, layer with rabbits, except of one rabbit that we have just removed, and layer with mice. You can also create a new layer here without assigning any objects. For example, if I have a few selected objects and I click this icon, it will create a new layer, but it won't assign any selected objects to this layer. And also, you notice that I still have mice layer selected, although I have just created a new layer. It's something you can change in options if you want. For example, if I go into options here and click make new layer current. So if I have a tick on here on make new layer current, now when I create a new layer, it will immediately highlight this new layer instead of keep active my previous layer. Next two icons will just move my layers around. It doesn't actually change anything in your scene. It's more like the way to sort out the visibility of your layers, the way it's easier for you to work with them. Then in options, there is also options add new objects to current layer. Let's select this layer, empty layer 1 we have. If I create a new object, by default, it won't place it on the layers that I have highlighted. If I want all the new objects that I create appears on the same layer, I can go to options, add new objects to current layer. So now when I have this layer selected and I create a new object, be object number 1, object number 2, and now I can see that those two objects are part of my layer 1. Another way to actually see in your viewport which objects are assigned to which layer would be to use different colors for different layer. For example, let's do that. Let's go to top mice layer and click here. Now we can assign color to that layer. Let's choose blue, and let's do the same with the cats. We can choose red, and rabbit, I don't know, let's say yellow. Okay, in the viewport, if I click option 5, I'll get this shaded view but with wireframe unshaded. And now the wireframe color changes and will reflect these colors that I have just assigned to different layers. So now I can easily spot that this rabbit is not assigned to my rabbits layer. So I can select it, I go to my layer, click right mouse button and click add selected objects. And now when I deselect it, wireframe of this rabbit has changed its color, and now I know that it became part of my rabbits layer. Let me show what else you can do with layers. So you have visibility and you have this letter P. Letter P means that it's visible in your animation, and if you deselect it and you have some animation, you won't see this layer being part of your animation. If you click here, you can change, there is different modes you can show objects of your layer. One of them would be this gray wireframe. When you use it, you will see your objects like that and you won't be able to select them. If I click again, I'll see the letter R, and the letter R it basically would do the same, only it will show me all the geometry on this layer in a normal shaded way, and I also won't be able to select any of them. So this option called reference, you can also find it in this menu if you go there. If you click on layer with right mouse button, choose set selected layers, and you see there is a normal, template and reference. More settings you can find here in the layers. For example, you can set selected layers to show as a bounding box. Full detail will show it back. Bounding box might be useful when you have very limited memory in your computer and you basically want to keep your geometry in the scene and just reduce the amount of memories that may use to render everything, especially if you have a very busy scene. And the other useful one could be shaded and unshaded, textured and untextured. It will only change those objects' visibility that you have assigned to your layer. And textured and untextured, we can only see it if we have material with texture assigned to our objects. And now let's talk about how we can align and snap together different objects. So I have just created a new scene and let me add a few objects. So let's go to modify and let's start with snap together tool. This is very intuitive tool. All it does is snap one object to another object based on 2 points you select. For example, I want to snap this cube to that cylinder. I can click and hold left mouse button, and you see when I move it, I see little arrow change directions. For example, I want this area here, then I can click and hold left mouse button again on the area where I want to snap it, for example, somewhere here. And you see Maya highlighted the path that it's going to use to move my objects. And when I'm happy with that, I just click enter and ta-da! My cube snapped to my cylinder. So let's do it again. For example, I want that shape snap on top of the cylinder, so I click here. So I select my last use tool here, click here, and then here, and then click enter, and here we go. Let's undo that for a second. There is different settings in this tool. If I go modify snap together tool and click on this little icon. So for example, we want this object to be placed here, click enter. You see, Maya also rotated it to match the axis orientation of the second object. So let's undo that and let's do it again, only this time we choose only move objects only. So from this to this and click enter. And now Maya only moved our cone to the cylinder. So if we select cylinder and X-ray it, we can see that the cone is actually inside it. Let's undo that. The last settings we have is snap to polygon face. So now, for example, if I select these objects and go display polygons, face center. So now we can actually see exact center of every face. And if we use this tool again and choose snap to polygon faces, and let's keep it move and rotate objects. So watch what happens. I will click somewhere here, but the arrow will appear exactly in the center of this polygon. And the same with this cube. If I click on the surface of the cube, the arrow will also appear in the center of this polygon. And now I click enter, and my cone placed exactly in the center of the cube because I use that snap to polygon face option. The next one is align tool. It doesn't have any settings. The way it works, the first selected objects will be aligned to the second selected objects. Now when I selected two objects, you see there is little icons here, and when I rotate my scene, they'll appear and disappear. Based on the angle view, you will have different options how you can align your objects. Let's first align them based on the center on the same line. So if I click this little icon here, it will move it to exact center on this axis. If I move my camera, now I think, okay, I want to place that cube to the same level on axis Y. So I can click this icon, and now I want to put this cube on top of that cube using my align tool. First, I can move my cube to that level and just use that icon here, and then I can center that cube with this cube using that icon here, and now I got it just exactly where I wanted. This is a very useful tool, and I think it's very intuitive, so you can just give it a go and practice it a little bit. It will work with all the objects within your scene. So let's do it again. I want to put this cone on top of this cylinder, so I select cones and I select cylinder. So I'll look around and try to find the icons that look similar to what I want to do. I think this one. If I click and hold left mouse button, it will actually highlight me the area that May is going to use to align these two objects. So it looks right. And now I have this cone matches the height of the cylinder. And if I click here, I'll move it to that center line. And now I just need to move it here. So I can click here and I'll move it here. And yep, here we go. Now let's look at the other way to align our objects. So if we go modify, snap align objects here and just separate this menu. So here is a different randomly placed cubes. I'm going to select all of them and use align objects and click here to open the settings. There's different align modes I can use. There is a minimum, mild, maximum. This one will distribute objects, which means it will place objects within the same even distance from each other, and this one going to stack objects on top of each other. Let's try to use minimum align mode, which should align them all based on the bottom line. Let's use world Y, deselect world X, so we'll use this Y axis, and align to let's use last selected objects for now and just click apply. Now all the objects align perfectly on this bottom line, which called minimum align mode in align objects options. And now I want to align all of them again on axis X. So I will deselect world Y and I'll select world X. And let's change our selection slightly. Let's move this object here and we'll select all these objects, and then we'll select these objects and align to last selected objects and click apply. Maya will move all the objects to the last selected objects and align them all on world X axis. And let's undo that and change it to selection average and click apply. Let's do it again. And you see both objects on both sides moved to the average center between them and aligned in one line. The other very useful option in align objects is distribution. Let's change align axis orientation to world Z and choose distribution and click apply. Now may I moved all the objects so that we have exactly the same distance between all of them here. And let's check the last one. We choose stack. Let's keep world Z orientation and click apply. May I stacked all the objects on top of each other, based on z-axis orientation, which is our blue arrow. Let's do the same, only using y-axis orientation. I'll select this object and I'll move it somewhere, and then I select all of them. And first I'll want to distribute all the objects on a world Y and click apply. And now I want to find the central line and move them all to center. And I'll change orientation to world X, click apply, and change world orientation again to world Y and click apply. And now I have all of them on top of each other. Let's quickly look at these three options: point to point, 2 points to points, and 3 points to points. So for example, if I select this cube and I go to vertex mode and I'll select this vertex, then holding shift I can select another object, for example this cone, go to vertex mode and select that vertex on the top. And now I click point to point, and Maya will move the selected vertex of my first selected objects to the selected vertex of my second selected object. And here we go. And the same with 2 points to 2 points. For example, I select these 2 points, then I select this object, go to vertex mode, and I select these 2 points and click 2 points to 2 points. And now may I move this object to that object. Now if we do the same, only we select 3 points here, and for example we'll select 3 points here and click 3 points to 3 points, and now we have our cube snapped to another object based on this based on those 3 points that I have just selected. And now let's look at the last one, position along curve, to show you how the selection order of the objects will affect position along curve. So let's select them one by one, just like that. And for the last one, let's select the curve and click position along curve. So basically what it does, it just distributes all the objects you have along the curve. It doesn't connect them to the curve, so if I try to move objects, I can just move them all separately from the curve. See what happens if I just select them all like this. When you select objects with lasso like that, it doesn't select them in the same order like I have it here. It usually selects them in a more random order. So now I select my curve and I click position along curve. Now all the objects are in a random order. Let's select 2 small, 2 larger, slightly larger, 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 and the biggest one. And now I can select curve and I click position along curve. You see, the order I selected them would be placed on a curve based on the direction on the curve, but I'll talk about it when I talk about curves and NURBS geometry in Maya. And now let me show you how you can duplicate objects in Maya. One of the ways, as you already know, if we hold shift and use move tool, it will create clone, just like that. And the other way would be to use a hotkey, shift D. Also, watch what happens. If I select this cube and I click shift D, you see in the outliner I can see that there is another cube. And now we have cube 1 and cube 3 just on top of each other. When that happens, you actually can spot it in Maya, because you see, like, the wireframe looks slightly different than the regular wireframe. Now let's move our duplicate and try again. This time I'll create duplicates and I'll move it, and I create another duplicate, and you'll see what happens. I click shift D, I move my cube, and I click shift D again, and you see my create another cube, but also copied the transformation I have just done. And if I keep using shift D, it will keep creating cubes like that. using exactly the same transformation I have done. If you don't want to duplicate your object with transformation, you can use Command D instead. For example, I select object, I click Command D, I move it, I click Command D, and it creates duplicates of my objects without applying this transformation I have just done. If you go to Edit in the main menu, you'll see that here is all the duplicate options you can have. Duplicate and duplicate with transform that I have just showed you. So let's check duplicate spatial and click here on these icons to open the settings. So the first option we see here, it's a geometry type, whether it's copy or instance. Let me show you. Let's create one duplicate as a copy and move it here, and another duplicate as an instance and move it here. And now if we select our original cube and do something like that, maybe we'll do extrude, the instance duplicate will keep connection to the original geometry. So everything I do with the original geometry and vice versa will be exactly the same, while the copy type will have its own history and won't be connected to the original object. And if you want to break that connection and don't have instance type of geometry anymore, deleting the history won't be enough. All you need to do is go to Modify, Convert, Instance to Object. And now I can adjust the original object without affecting my previous instance object anymore. The next settings is group under parent, world, or new group. So for example, if I parent this object to that object, and now if I create duplicate of that objects and use group under parent, it will keep the same hierarchy here. So we'll just create a new object that will be parented to our pcube2. So let's check it. Let's see, apply. Let's move it. And let's move it away. Yeah, now you can see in outline we have pcube2 and cube3 and cube4 parented to the same object. And now if I select this object and choose world and click apply, it will create duplicate that is going to be separate from that hierarchy. It doesn't have any connection to the parent object. The same with the new group, it will just create a duplicate and place it in a new group. So if I click apply, move it away, you see in outline we have a new group with our duplicate. Smart transform is the same like duplicate with transformation. Let's go back to copy and a parent, and I choose a smart transform instead. So now let's select this cube, move it a little bit, and create duplicate, and now move it a little bit, and create more duplicates, and we'll keep the same transform on all of them. At the next settings here, I can set up my own transformation. For example, again, let's have this cube here. I want to move it to a 1 and also want to rotate it, or maybe let's have 2 and let's rotate it to 30 degrees, for example, and I try click apply. You see it creates duplicate, also rotate it, and also move it. And let's have the same scale on all of them, and yeah, and let's have 20 copies and click apply. You see what happens? Maya will create 20 copies of the same object and will apply all the transformation, translate, rotate, or scales that I'll specify here in this window. And these last 3 settings, they're not very important. It's whether how much of history you want to keep with every object. If some of your objects will have different input connections, you can use different settings to keep exactly the same history for every object that you duplicate, which is something you probably don't need at this stage. Duplicate Special, you can not only duplicate objects, but also duplicate groups. Let me show you. For example, I have a group of objects here, and I move pivot in the middle of the group. This is the settings I'm using. So if I select group and click apply, you see, Maya will duplicate my group again and again and again. Use exact settings, but for whole group. Let's undo that. And let's open my group and select all the objects inside the group. And now click apply. And now Maya will duplicate every object separately. You'll get different results when you duplicate groups and when you duplicate a number of selected objects. So this is it for this video. I'm thinking of creating a video with exercises just to practice everything that I have showed you so far. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next video.